the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review Programme update. I'll just remind councillors the Independent Flood Review came back with 47 recommendations, and we have a whole work programme set up to deliver on those. And every month we see, or every quarter I think actually, isn't it, Louise? We see the updates on how those items are progressing. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Councillor, Mr.
I'll just do an introduction. Thank you, Chair. So we've got Louise here and Julianne as well, the team overseeing this program. We do have a little bit of a background presentation, just acknowledging that we've got some new councillors, and it'd be useful just to do a quick key points of the background, and then we'll take you through the paper. So over to Louise.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, Louise McPhail. I am the Manager for Recovery and Asset Management, and together with Julianne, we are the very small recovery team that is coordinating the response to the recommendations from the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review. We'll probably take the paper as read, but we will go through this brief presentation that we have just to update you on our 6 priority projects that we've been working on for nearly a year now. It hasn't quite come up. Oh, there it has. So we have 81% of our recommendations are either underway or partially underway. We have 7 completed and a couple that we haven't quite started yet, but making progress on those. This diagram shows, and for the returning councillors, you may see that things have shifted a bit. Everything that's in that column to the left was kind of more spread out in earlier versions of this diagram, but it shows that we have started as many of these projects as we can, and they're all underway. The yellow ones are the 6 priority projects, and the others are projects that we have identified as kind of BAU work that the council would have been undertaking anyway. And the projects to the right are the future projects that may be undertaken if the council decides to do so once we have accomplished those 6 priority projects. So these are our 6 priority projects. I'll run through them and give you a bit of an update on where we are up to with them. I'll probably skip over the Reimagining Flood Resilience because the next paper is specific to the Reimagining project. And we'll talk about the Extreme Weather Hub and the flood forecasting systems together because they are now joined. But you'll remember this Extreme Weather Hub was establishing a one source of the truth, a one page on our website where the community could go to find information around a weather event or around river levels and rainfalls. It was information that we all had already available on our website, but we've brought it together in one place so that it's easier to find and understand. And we've also developed guidance and educational pieces of information that we have loaded on that web page with some animations and things to explain to people about stock banks, how to look after stock banks, why they're important, what we mean by a 1 in 100 year level of flood, the probability and what that means. So that's been quite well received. And phase 2, which has just begun, was to link that Extreme Weather Hub with the flood forecasting system. This was something that we used internally, but the platform that our flood modelers were using was not developed and stable enough to use as an external facing platform. So a lot of work has been going on with our flood modelers and our ICT technical team to build a platform that will showcase a flood forecasting system externally to the community, and that will be undergoing user testing next week with a group of staff that sit outside the technical concept of asset management and hydrological modelling and that sort of stuff, so that they will replicate members of the community and their level of understanding and that sort of stuff. So once that user testing is complete, which should be before Christmas, early in the new year, we will add that flood forecasting dashboard to the Extreme Weather Hub we'll rearrange the weather hub a little bit so that the flood forecasting dashboard is the landing page, so that in an event, that's the first thing people can see. They'll be able to see, so we haven't got flood forecasting for every site, but we are adding to those sites as we go. But on those where we do have the flood forecasting, people will be able to see the current level that the river sits at and where we predict it will go to over the next 12 or 24 and 48 hours. Obviously, the closer it is, the more certain we are about that, so the first 12 hours. So that will be really useful, and that's what the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review asked for. We will probably bring that to you early in the new year so you can have a look. The bylaws, this is a significant piece of work. It's the bylaw itself has been drafted. It's just being reviewed internally by staff. Some initial pre-engagement has occurred with landowners, etc., who will be directly impacted by this bylaw, and we hope to be able to bring it to you to a workshop and then a council meeting in February for you to have a look at it.
And then could you just, for new councillors, just explain what the bylaw's about?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, pre-Cyclone Gabriel, we didn't actually have any rules or regulations that would help us protect our flood infrastructure, so our stop banks and our pump stations and our floodgates. So a bylaw allows the regional council to put in place rules that will allow us to take action if there is any damage to that flood infrastructure. So, for example, if we have four-wheel drive vehicles driving up and down the stop banks, we can do something about it. If we have someone who builds, that has a stop bank that goes through the bottom of their garden and they put in some steps, or they dig out a bit of it to put in a barbecue or whatever, and these are all real life examples, then we actually have the power to ask them to remediate that and fix it and repair the stop bank. Because any of those types of things that damage the stop bank immediately compromises the resilience of those stop banks.
So Louise, am I right? There were multiple cases where that sort of activity was a trigger point for damage to the stop bank during Gabrielle?
I don't think so, no.
So I'm not aware of there being a cause and effect for any particular infrastructure, third-party infrastructure on stop banks, but it is an area that we need to work hard on. I think that we also have some recommended distances for infrastructure from stop banks, so that's providing safety, but also allows us to follow up. There are some protections in the Regional Resource Management Plan about when you need to get a consent, but this really just strengthens our approach to protecting that infrastructure.
So yes, we will bring this bylaw to you so that you can see the content and review and make comment, etc. And then we will go out for public consultation probably around April next year. The Trigger Levels project, so this is another significant project. We are working collaboratively with the territorial authorities and CDM and the emergency services. This project has been paused over the last couple of months, primarily because of the coronial inquiry and the number of staff that were involved in that process, but we're picking it back up again now. We have two pilot communities, the Esk Whirinaki area and the part of Waipawa that they locally call Lower Waipawa. The community aspect or community engagement aspect of this project is led by the territorial authorities, so Central Hawke's Bay District Council and Hastings District Council will lead the community interaction, and the role of Hawke's Bay Regional Council, apart from a supporting and facilitation role that Julianne and I undertake, we provide the data and the modelling that's requested by the community or the TAs or CDM through that process. So the idea is to work with these two initial communities and then develop a framework that we can roll out further across the region and work with other communities. We were hoping to have a community in Wairoa. Initially, that didn't happen, but some work is happening at the moment with the around North Clyde and Category 2 area up there, where they are developing trigger points and evacuation protocols, and we have linked in with that project so that we will still align and have similar outcomes from it. And lastly, the hazard portal business case. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the hazard portal is a tool that is administered by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. It was under the governance of the Joint Civil Defence Committee. But the proposal is that we bring that hazard portal into Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and we administer it and manage it. It holds all the hazard information for the region. It's a leader across the country for this type of tool, and the community can go in and download reports, property specific, that will tell them the hazard information that's relevant to their area. It has some issues around being sustainable on the platform that it currently sits on. It was never developed to hold as much information as it does. It has, every time a new hazard layer is developed, either flooding or GNS Science comes out with something, and it's got liquefaction and earthquake, those types of things on there. Every time that gets added to the portal, it becomes more compromised. And so we needed to understand what it would require to either rectify the current hazard portal or replace it with something else. So our GIS team and our ICT team have been undertaking a business case to work out what the different options are, and it's supposed to come to you in December. Hopefully it's currently out for review by staff, and we will bring it to you at the next council meeting. That scope has widened a little bit because there were the Lagoima regulations that you may be aware of that came out in July, where we now have to provide, as the regional council, all the natural hazard information that we hold or are aware of to the territorial authorities so that they can add it to their LIM reports for individual properties. So we have been working with the TAs on making sure that we have the right processes in place for that to happen, and to make sure that we have the right information on the hazard portal, and that will be used by the TAs as the main source of information for them, so that we have a one source of the truth. So that did widen the scope a little bit of that project. So that's an update on the 6. We won't talk about the reimagining because it's the next paper, but it's very busy in that space too. Another piece of work that we have done alongside all of these projects and the report that you have seen is that we engaged PricewaterhouseCoopers to undertake a bit of an assurance program to make sure that the process that Julianne and I had developed and worked with staff from across council to identify the deliverables that were required for each recommendation and bundle them into projects and then work with these projects, that was actually an appropriate process to be undertaken, and that the deliverables that we had identified would meet the recommendations of the HBIFR report. So phase 1 of that has been finished, and I might ask Julianne to speak about that a little bit, but we have got a draft report. Again, it's under review, but we hope to bring that to you in the beginning of the new year. And it says, I think it's in like 43 of the recommendations align with, or our deliverables align with 43 out of the 47. There are some that partially align that we're just negotiating with them about where the misalignment might be or what we can do to make sure that that aligns. And there is one recommendation that they feel that we haven't aligned with yet, but we haven't started it, and that's to do with river mouth openings across the whole region, not in Wairoa. But Julianne, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I think the PwC have met with staff and they've done quite a thorough review, and we've provided them evidence and answered a large raft of questions. So I think we've been able to satisfy their analysis and assessment of the work that we've undertaken in phase 2, about verifying that we've completed recommendations. We're just gathering evidence and we've had that over and we're just in the process of finalising. So hopefully the final report will be ready probably next month.
Any questions? Questions, Councillor Radley?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Louise, Marianne. Who's doing the review of the alignment?
PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC.
Thanks, Louise. It's probably worth sharing when that review's done with our independent panellists. I think they'd be very pleased to receive how we're tracking along and all the improvements we're making. Thank you, if we could do that.
Councillor McElroy?
Thank you, Korua. Just back on the extreme weather hub and the flood forecasting. So you mentioned not every site is...
No, so not every site yet has so it's a model that runs constantly in the background that takes all the weather information and predicts where the river might go based on those rainfall levels, et cetera, and not every, so we have lots of river level sites and lots of rainfall sites right across the region, but not each of those sites has that model attached to it yet, but the team is working through that in the background, so we will continue to add more sites where the flood forecasting will become available.
And so that with the dashboard that will be available on the website, whānau will be able to see what the situation is, what's happening in the land.
So it will be, they can choose whichever river level site is either closest to them or up catchment from them, wherever they want to see. So for Wairoa, I think it's yeah, and they can see what the prediction for the river level is there and how it will look. I'll predict what the river level will rise to or fall in the next 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours. But they can, choose whichever site they...
So you can click on the Maru telemetry now.
Yes.
But what I'm trying to, I can't see anything, so what are our community going to be looking at so they can make, because if you haven't got the trigger levels as well, because trigger levels are really important, because that gives you an idea like whether you should get out, you should consider getting out.
Absolutely. So for Wairoa, one of the points that they have on the dashboard is the swing set at the park, and it will show where the water level will be in relation to that swing set, and so people will know locally what that means to them if they know where the swing set is in relation to the river. So that's the first part. Eventually, once we have developed the trigger levels and those sorts of things, all of that will come together. But at the moment, they're separate projects.
So does this incorporate AI technology as well? So it's like the modelling, and was this still human run?
So at the moment, the modelling doesn't incorporate AI, but that's something we're keeping abreast of, what's happening in that area. And what is really important for our models is the input to the models, and so that's that Met Service information that goes into those models.
As well as what's happening on the rivers with the flows and how fast. And
That's correct. So it is also self-correcting. So all of the measurement stations predict what the level should be, then they measure what the actual level is, and then that can self-correct the model as well. So it's quite complex, the whole model arrangement. The key change here is we're taking the models that our staff would normally see and providing them to the public so that the public has all of the real-time information to make decisions for themselves about their risk appetite, etc.
I think another piece you haven't touched on is we've now got the live stream webcams, which are pointing at things that you can recognise. So I know in Wairoa particularly, it's pointing at the pillar of the main bridge that's got the markings of where Cyclone Bowler was. And so in real time you can see where literally...
so in Wairoa at the moment...
And Maru is the same.
Yeah, in Wairoa at the moment we have the web camera on the bridge and 2 on the river mouth. Yeah.
And sorry, what was the date that you think you'll have all the modelling for all the areas complete?
I don't know how long it will take. We've brought in extra resources to help with that, but it's...
Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yes. Councillor Blake?
Would you be able to share with us the recommendation that you mentioned that we actually seem to be off on? Which recommendation was that?
Oh, so the actual wording I haven't got, but it's about the regional council doing feasibility for permanent river mouth openings across the whole region. So we have 18 river mouths and looking into having permanent river mouth openings for those 18 rivers, which is...
That sort of.
So that's, I think, if we look at that other diagram, that was sitting in the outer years. So it's a considerable piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's really saying, should we be having groins and permanent openings? We know that infrastructure potentially is in the tens of millions of dollars. So we need to work through what's a prudent approach to that recommendation.
Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome. Councillor McIntosh?
No.
No? Councillor Curtin?
Yeah, just in terms of the model, is it taking into account, or does it factor in regard to river openings and or slash accumulation at points? Is it factoring in contingencies that inevitably arise?
So I think we can factor in some contingencies. So in the example of the Wairau River, we can model that with varying mouth conditions, and we actively do that. In terms of slash, the model can't predict what the slash will do or where it will accumulate, and likewise it doesn't account for sediment. So they're just unable to be modelled at the moment.
Questions? No comments from you, Chief Executive?
No. Actually, just only to say, I think thank you to Council's direction, and it's really useful to see progress on this. A lot of the matters sitting here have been well traversed as well through the coronial inquiry, so it's really important that we make progress on these recommendations. And as you'll see, as we have continued to work through the annual plan, that Council has the potential to keep its investment rolling into this area of business.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And the 47 recommendations, we approached all of them with equal speed, and the independent assurance section of them I think is really worth noting, that we are sure that we are delivering on what those recommendations asked of us. So, yeah, thank you, Louise. I know that we've put extra resource in, we're still moving quickly with it, but lots to do. Yeah. The recommendations just to receive this report. Do I have a... I'd be happy to. Thank you, Councillor Ormsby. Thank you, Councillor McElroy. Would you like to speak some more?
No, just thank you to the team.
Appreciate the update. Thank you. Any more comments?
Great work.
Great work. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you, everyone. I think Louise is going to stay. We're quite ahead of time. We're not going to stop for a break. We're going to continue. Everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Great. We're going to move on to item 7.2, Reimagining Flood Resilience Project Update. This is Louise, and welcome Simon. And of course we have had bus tours and the first opening parts of our stakeholder reference group. I know some councillors have been there. We'll come to you at the end to perhaps make some comment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I will introduce Simon. You may have met him before. For the new councillor, Simon, do you want to say that?
Sure. Kia ora koutou, ko Simon Bendel tōku ingoa, so from Traverse Environmental, so a contractor to council. Background in environmental planning, but spend most of my time these days in the climate adaptation, natural hazards planning space. So a long-term project here for me has been the Hawke's Bay, the Clifton to Tangoa coastal hazards work. And I guess part of my role here is to help Louise as the co-project lead and try and bring some of those lessons from other similar projects into this one. So nice to meet those that I haven't met before. Kia ora.
We will start just with a project overview and a bit of a recap for our new councillors, and then Simon will provide an update on the stakeholder reference groups and the work that's been happening in the last month or so to really bring this project forward. So just a recap, The Reimagining Flood Resilience Project is a direct outcome from the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review. There's an awful lot of words on this slide, and we have shared it with the governance team, so it should be loaded into your systems. But the recommendations speak to the Regional Council working with communities at place to understand what the future of flood resilience means for them, and how we can take on board their knowledge and their experiences to improve flood resilience in the future. It's also to work with our partner stakeholders of the territorial authorities and Mana Whenua to input their thoughts into what the future of flood resilience would look like. And this is an intergenerational project. We're not looking at the next 5 years or the next 10 years. We're looking at the next 50 or 100 years and what future flood resilience might look like. The Reimagining project is focusing on the two major schemes within the Hawke's Bay region. So we have 27 schemes in total, but the two major ones are the Heritonga Plains on your left of the screen, and the Upper Tukituki in central Hawke's Bay. And joined, these two schemes offer a level of flood resilience protection to 84% of the Hawke's Bay community. So the engagement topics that we are working through at the moment with our stakeholder reference groups are asking them those questions about what does the future of flood resilience look like for those communities? How do we balance the level of risk that communities are prepared to live with and affordability? How do we manage future over-design events? So not necessarily as large as Cyclone Gabriel, but our schemes at the moment offer a level of service mostly to a 1 in 100 year level of service, but we may have a 1 in 250 year storm. How do we manage that, and how do we better control where the water goes? How should flood resilience reflect Mataranga Maori? So this project is a pilot project for our new Mataranga Maori framework within HBRC, and we are working with Mana Whenua through the project. And we're also looking at how engineering solutions can work alongside nature and provide improved flood resilience. So that's looking at nature-based solutions, that's looking at making room for the river, incorporating wetlands in upper catchments, planting in upper catchments to slow the water down, and work alongside the more hard engineering solutions. And again, number 6, it relates a little bit to number 2, but how much are communities willing to pay to increase their flood resilience to flooding, and how should it be paid for? So they're quite gnarly questions that we are working through with our stakeholder reference groups at the moment. This just outlines the current project structure. So we have Hawke's Bay Regional Council at the top as the decision maker. We have established 2 steering groups, one for the Upper Tukituki and one for the Heritonga Plains. And those steering groups have members from this council, but also the prospective territorial authority. So for Upper Tukituki, there are 2 councillors from Central Hawke's Bay District Council, as well as the PSGE for that area, so that is Tamatea Pokai Whenua. And then for the Heritonga Plains, we have councillor representation from Napier City Council and Hastings District Council, and we have PSGE representation from Tamatea Pokai Whenua and Mana Ahuriri. We have then established these 2 stakeholder groups, and Simon will talk about them a little bit later and how they were established, but they are made up of community members from those 2 areas. Obviously the Heritonga Plains is a little bit bigger. And then we have some focus groups that sit beneath those stakeholder groups. Some of those focus groups are already predetermined. We are doing some AWA-based focus groups that I think Simon will also talk to later, and some youth, or a focus group focused with youth and young professionals, just to give them space to have a voice in the project. And all of those different layers are supported by the technical advisory group, the TAG that sits in the middle, And there are representatives from all of those agencies, organisations that sit there and support their councillor representatives and the community stakeholders. So we have got operational staff from Hawke's Bay Regional Council, the 3 territorial authorities, the PSGs and Ngāti Kahanunu that all sit in the middle there. The timeframe of this project, we are currently in phase 2, specifically in phase 2B. So the stakeholder reference groups have just been stood up. We are into 3rd sessions next week, and they will run through to March next year. There will be a total of 5 sessions for each stakeholder reference group to work through. And the outcomes from this project and the things that we hear from our stakeholder reference groups are intended to inform our next long-term plan. So we will start working through that the middle of next year and towards the end of next year to inform the June 2027 long-term plan, and then implementation onwards from there. Running alongside this, and Mike is in the room, but there's a comms campaign running alongside it around the reducing flood risk in Hawke's Bay discussion document that we developed 2 or 3 months ago now, that talks about the different types of flooding in right across Hawke's Bay, not just within the 2 schemes that Reimagining Project sits with. And the comms and engagement team have outlined the way that they propose to disperse that information across the community so that everyone is fully aware of the, I suppose, issues that we face with flood resilience and the potential cost for mitigating those future flood risks, including the coastal hazard stuff and the Reimagining Project. But if you have any questions, Mike will be able to answer those. And I will hand to Simon.
Sure, thanks Louise. So I guess I'll run through reasonably briefly, but to highlight sort of each part of this project structure and where each part is up to. Louise covered a bit of this, but the TAG group in the middle there is functioning really, really well. It's a great collaboration between a number of different agencies. We meet every 3 weeks. We've concluded a leading practice review looking at 6 major examples around the country of projects like this and lessons from those. We have an economic analysis underway to consider the economic benefit of the scheme and a particular focus on the bridges at Awatoto. And a bunch of others are happening there. I think it's a good example of cross-council and PSGE coordination there. So a really highly functioning group there. For the steering groups, as you'll be aware, so we're going to hold a next meeting of this group on the 8th of December. I think we have members from everyone confirmed bar Hastings. Is there the latest on that?
No.
No, still pending Hastings appointments, but otherwise all appointments are in place. So the next meeting will be our first one post-elections, a chance to update everyone on the project and get them stood up and running again. For the reference groups, I will speak more to these in the following slides, but as Louise mentions, these are both now stood up and underway. So perhaps I'll come back to those on the next couple of slides. And for the focus groups, Louise touched on these briefly too. So these are not yet set up, but the idea here is we're going to have 5 hardwired or preset focus groups. Their role will be to support the reference groups with more detailed discussions on particular topics. So for the 5 hardwired groups, the thinking is to establish 4 based on mana whenua, with particular links to those 4 awa. Excuse me. The plan is to call a hui early in the new year to present this idea, particularly to those marae that link to those awa, and test this idea. And if it works, go full from there with these 4 focus groups focused on those awa and Mātauranga Māori mana whenua perspectives. Alongside that, there is a proposal for a single rangatahi young professionals group to inform both schemes. We're mindful that we haven't got a strong youth voice in the SRGs right now, so we're keen to bring that voice in clearly and provide a safe space for that to happen. Again, targeted for the new year once schools go back. So the reference groups themselves, I think the next few slides will focus in on how these have been formed and how they are currently tracking. So for the Upper Tukutuki, we had, as per your paper, targeted 20 members, and following a campaign we've confirmed 18, so a pretty good result. The group itself is, I'd say, nicely diverse, so a broad range of perspectives, of ages. I think it's a really productive, well-running group so far, so pleased with that outcome. And they've had one meeting so far, which was on Monday. And for the Heretaunga scheme group, we had targeted 40 or 45? 45. And we have 55, so we've oversubscribed for that. The group, I'd say, is less diverse in their makeup than the Upper Tukituki scheme group is, and I think that's coming through a little bit in the interactions so far. That said, there's a lot of expertise and depth in that group, so we're pleased with that, and certainly a lot of experience of Gabrielle and lots of ideas on how we might proceed.
Chair,
Please.
I think they can, the bias, perhaps this is self-interest, but the bias towards 60 plus, I mean, it's no bad thing, is it? Because a lot of the value you're going to get
Of course you would say that.
a lot of the value you're going to get out of these groups
Value all
what
over the
people
paddock.
have experienced. And those guys have seen a lot, they've interacted with us, and was gratifying really to see the extent of information they had and the experience they had. So, my point is it's quite a good thing having a bit of a skew that way, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with the experience element. That's really important. As I said, I'm genuinely pleased there is that expertise and depth of knowledge in the room. I do think we need to make sure we elevate younger voices too, though, right? And that's why this focus, you can sit up to focus on that. I think that bring a very different point of view. That's important when this project is thinking 100 plus years into the future. We've got to make sure that voice is there as well. So don't disagree, but I think bringing the youth voice also really important.
Thank you, Councillor Kupinski.
There seems to be a real difference within the group, especially the Heretaunga group, between those that see the need to make the current system work perfectly and those that are looking 50 to 100 years away. So maybe in your focus groups you could sort those out into different groups.
Okay,
Councillor Mbay.
so that seems to be the perception. But when you start a job, take the lowest hanging fruit first. It's the easiest. That's where they focus. But I know them and I talk to them, they talk to me. They're thinking absolute long term. They got farms with grandchildren going to take over those farms. They're thinking long term. What you hear on the bus trip is the low hanging fruit, but they're absolutely thinking long term. They think longer term than any of us. So don't take it just because they actually talk about the management of the river system. That's a low hanging fruit. That's where they've been, but they're absolutely thinking long term. Don't get them wrong.
So, Simon, I think the job of the coordinators and Tonkin and Taylor is to bring together, we've had the first two, I think, bringing together those views, walking through the different scenarios and testing those thinking, stretching those around, whatever the makeup of the group is. Is that the way you're rolling out from here?
Exactly right. Trying to bring those diverse perspectives. And I think anchoring it in this project, which is not about day-to-day maintenance, it's actually much longer term than that. But in that mix, as Edith's pointed out, there's lots of value coming through from those with that background and expertise. So a good mix, but certainly some strong opinions in there as well.
And I have a view on that, and I differ from Simon. I believe that if you're just thinking long-term reimagining rivers, we need to think about management of the channels, maintenance. That is so important because I believe, and they believe, that we actually have had major breakdowns in our river system because maintenance wasn't done properly. Low-hanging fruit, but they're thinking long-term. So I think that's, and if we forget, if we're just going to make a beautiful river system with widening rivers and flow path, but we forget the day-to-day management and how we continue to maintain that, then we're still failing. And that's where they're coming from.
That's fair. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm
Councillor
just
McElroy.
noting the percentage of tangata whenua and in your numbers you're talking about diversity, but just noticing in there we are minority in both your slides. Noting that as well. I understand the kōrero of rangatahi, but with our people, we make mokopuna decisions. So we think way ahead, and so it's not about the here and now, it's about the next generations, those yet to be born. So, yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about that.
Thank you, Councillor McElroy. Can you speak a little bit to the focus groups and also specific engagement for mana whenua?
Yeah, thank you. As a valid point for sure. We were hoping to get more. We've got, I think, a good group there, but certainly there is, I think, more that could be done. This project is, as Louise mentioned, a pilot for the Mātauranga framework for HBRC, so that's part of trying to make sure the project as a whole is nested in that approach. That's one. Two, these focus groups on the screen there are really a direct response to that lack of participation you've pointed to. We need to elevate that voice, and so the idea is to create a much more targeted and hopefully, appealing is the wrong word, but hopefully a group that's better able to support them to participate effectively by focusing in on the spaces that matter to mana whenua, by focusing on this awa-based approach. That's the idea, to try and elevate that voice more than we currently have it. So I agree with the concern, and the approach is there with those focus groups attempt to elevate that voice. Right, just a couple of upcoming dates for these groups. So Louise has mentioned these. We've got 2 more coming up next week for both focus groups, which will be an important grounding. We had the bus trips, as mentioned, on Monday this week, so pretty rapid fire between now and the end of the year. Our next session won't be until January, late January, when they reform after the Christmas break. We're mindful of people's time and families and keen not to interrupt holidays too much. But mindful too, there's a bit of a gap between drinks there, so maintaining momentum will be important. Tonkin and Taylor, as mentioned, are supporting us through as we kind of wrap up for this year and get ready for next year. A little bit of feedback in terms of what we've heard from the group so far. I've only got a report in terms of this post-meeting survey from the first meeting for the Head of Tonga group. The bus trip was just on Monday, so we're waiting on the survey from that. But in terms of the feedback we've had so far from the Head of Tonga group, just a quick snapshot of some of this thinking here. This question was about making sure they understand the purpose of the group, and I think there's a good argument there that there is strong understanding around the purpose of the groups and what they're there for. This next question is around making sure they understand their own roles on those groups, and again, I think a pretty good response rate that there's a good understanding of their roles in those groups. An overall rating of the first meeting, a bit more mixed, it's fair to say, for our first meeting. Many felt that it was good or adequate, so sort of in the middle there, but a few were less impressed, so some work through there in terms of lifting that experience. And this here is we asked the question, give us 3 words that describe how you feel about this project right now. And this is a word cloud of the sort of responses we had. The theory is the bigger the word, the more often that word appeared in the feedback. So, you know, the big bold words there I think are quite positive. You'll see in the smaller words, perhaps unsurprising, there is some concern around flooding more generally. There are some questions about motivations, perhaps some uncertainty about why they're there. I think that's to be expected from meeting 1, would be my view on something like this. But actually, seeing this feedback, I was quite encouraged that from the get-go is generally a positive feeling amongst the group, would be my view on it at the moment, after meeting 1. So this is an overly complicated slide, but I just wanted to touch briefly on the deliverable that will arrive back at this table. So that might be, oh, it's not too bad. If you just focus on just the top for now, because it's basically a duplication for both of those reference groups. If I start on your left, the side, these are the focus groups being stood up to help support the SRGs. The next column along, you've got those 5 SRG meetings, all of which will focus in on 1 or 2 particular topics that Louise highlighted. After each of those meetings, we've got the first one done already, there will be a report summarising the outcomes of that. The concept here is that through those 5 meetings, it will be a process of iteratively developing their outcome. And their outcome we're describing is a community vision for flood resilience. So it is, we've only got 5 sessions. It is higher level. It is focused on visions and values. It's not focused on specific and localised engineering solutions. So you will get this high view of visions and values in terms of those 2 schemes. Now, the important thing we've been clear on from councillor so far is that we need some action alongside this. And so to bring that implementation approach, the TAG group, which Louise described before, are going to work in parallel with an action plan. The idea is that we're going to translate the vision and values piece from the SRGs into an actionable program of work for you to consider, with a view to how that might fit into a long-term plan. So the idea is this will all arrive back with you, I suppose, May is a target, isn't it? May, June, to start workshopping those outcomes. We would like to, after each SRG meeting, share the report so that the steering groups will receive that regular feedback around how each session has gone and the outcomes as they emerge, such that the outcomes won't be a surprise. And the idea here being that we'll develop up this outcome through these 5 sessions and bring it all together for you in May, June next year.
Councillor McIntosh?
When you get to the output being vision and values, and then the steering group takes that, vision and values sounds very aspirational to me and expensive. And so I'm unsure as to how you take that and end up with a pragmatic solution. Do you see what I mean? I feel they're going to come up and say, we want this, and when it comes to the crunch, we can do this. How does that work?
Oh, I can hear you take a breath. You go.
I think if you go back to those topics of engagement that we were working with the stakeholder reference groups on, so when we're talking visions and values, it's around what is the level of service that the community want or expect, and are they prepared to pay for that? So do they want a 1 in 100 year level of service, or actually is it a 1 in 500? Do they want the same level of service everywhere? There's quite a contrast between the Heritonga Plains scheme and the infrastructure and the communities and the investment that it protects, compared to when you look at the Upper Tukituki scheme, and it's more a rural based with fewer towns and fewer settlements. Do they have to be the same? Do we have different levels of service in different places? Are the community encouraged by the nature-based solutions working alongside the more hard engineering, or is it all hard engineering? And actually some of the feedback that we had from the first session was also, don't worry about the stock banks, they're already there. Can we have better monitoring and a warning system? So if that's the response we get from the community, then that is their vision and values. I don't think we're expecting, or we're hoping to guide them, that it's not this blue sky thinking that we're going to come up with something completely different, because we've put in these guardrails around what it is we can, afford and what the expectations are. So it will be tricky. But
do you think, another one? Do you think you've got enough there? So the first 5, roughly, of those are speaking what they would like, and the last one says how much you're prepared to pay. And so the first 5, they're going to come up with a range of things that they would like. And the last one, they're going to say how much they're prepared to pay. And there's likely to be a big gap between those 2 things. But they don't know. So it seems to me we get to the end of the process and we've got all the stuff they want and not enough funding to achieve it.
these aren't in any order. We're working with the groups, so they'll have all of these conversations throughout everything, so that the cost thing it's not at the end. We're hoping to incorporate it all the way through the discussion so that it's not a surprise.
Okay, so I think that my point is we need to be very careful to marry money up with expectation.
Yeah, yes. And we were clear about that at the beginning of the project, that sat at the front, and that this is a new process. We're working in a different way. So I think what comes out of it and how we shape that up will is probably yet to be seen. But we've been really very clear about the money side and the guardrails. Yeah, Councillor Van Beek?
I think, Simon, you related back to me also, and I think you made a reference before. The expectations are actually not way up there. They're actually quite pragmatic in that first focus group, and you were quite surprised about it. Maybe you can give a...
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair reflection. I think two things. I think the affordability cost is actually twice in here, quite deliberately so. So question 2 is balancing risk reduction with affordability. That's a big question, and it appears again at question 6. So it is, I think, a guardrail from the outset, as Louise has pointed to, and these 6 topics do frame how the workshops will be run as well. So workshops focus on those particular questions. I think to Edith's point, I agree with that. I think there is a good understanding in the group that that these things are paid for with ratepayer money, and that has a limit, and that there's no magical fairy that can deliver solutions for us. So I've picked that up already from conversations so far. There's much more of an interest in pragmatic ways to achieve better outcomes from what I've seen. But certainly those guardrails will be important, and one of the messages we heard loud and clear was a key learning from the coastal project was around leaving the ratepayer impact too late in the piece. So we're really mindful of that risk with this too, and keen to bring that up as much as we can early on.
Thanks.
We have actually heard from Tony Kupinski and Councillor Van Beek around engagement there, but Councillor Roadley, you were there also on Monday. Did you want to make some comments?
I'm happy to wait till the end of the presentation if that's...
Great.
Thank you. So my last slide, so it'll be come up quickly. So just a few key next steps for us. We have set up a little to the side of that main engagement structure, a direct working group with Napier City Council and Hastings District Council, Kiwi Rail and Waka Kotahi, looking specifically at the bridges at Awatoto. So we've had a couple of meetings already. Our next ones are coming up in a couple of weeks. We will get Tonkin Taylor to present some of the flooding impacts from those structures and start to work through, okay, what can we do in response to that? So that's, we're giving that a bit of attention. We've seen how much there is impact from those structures, and certainly so far there's a good alignment on those groups around working on solutions, but also getting clearer on the limitations, I suppose, those agencies have to fund works that aren't directly transport related. So that's a work in progress, and we'll keep you posted on that. As mentioned, we have...
Just on that, the Awatoto industry group, were they considered to be a stakeholder in that discussion?
At the moment, not directly, although we are keeping in touch with them. At the moment, we're very much focused on the assets themselves. The questions around how do we make sure, in the context of potential handing over of assets to TAs, in the context of how those structures are now, how can we look at lifting performance from a resilience perspective? So we're focusing there now, but add to that?
Yeah, so the AIAG, they are aware that we have formed this working group with NZTA and Kiwi Rail. They have a representative, AIAG, on the stakeholder reference group for the Haratonga Plains scheme. And we have mentioned to the working group with NZTA and Kiwi Rail that AIAG might be interested to be part of that group. But we just want to get that group established first with NZTA and Kiwi Rail and get a collaborative kind of working.
Yes, I just think it's important that they are fully aware of the implications on the in-stream scenario, so that their own developments are put in perspective.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Economic analysis outputs we're expecting the first early new year, and this one will be this broader view of the benefits of the scheme from economic perspective from both schemes. Scheme review updates are also underway. You'll be aware that Tonkin Taylor prepared scheme reviews for both schemes. Both of those, however, were scoped and started before this project was a thing, and so they have a particular focus, and we want to add to that to bring in some of this longer-term thinking from this project. That's a work underway. And as mentioned, we have confirmed our next steering group hui for the 8th of December.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Councillor Roadley.
Are we allowed comments?
Sure. We've had a lot of questions on the way.
Pardon?
I think we've had our questions on the way.
Yep, go. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the experience of travelling around and looking at these assets. It was a fantastic experience for myself personally to go with the community and look at them and have those one-on-one discussions with people who are really thinking about what's there now and what it needs to do and what they'd like it to do. So it was really valuable for me. A couple of points. The group in the Hiratonga stakeholder group who are absolutely invested in working with and thinking about the operational management of the scheme, the current scheme, I think, a huge resource that we cannot overlook, and that the opportunity to pull them into a focus group and really glean their insights is critical to this project. But I feel like it sits outside this project, but I don't think we can lose it. So I think a real opportunity to capture that, let them guide and work with the resourcing they need to dig in, kick every tyre, lift every bonnet, and come out with a really gold standard approach to that maintenance. But I think we need to be really mindful it sits over there, and this project, and you guys I know are already thinking about how that next group, how we keep returning them to the purpose of them being there, the purpose in developing and shaping the governance and the decisions around the financial, the go forward on those. So you'll be all over that, I'm sure. Two more things. One, it'd be great to be included in the summaries after those meetings, just by way of hearing and seeing what's happening in them, because I think it's a fantastic project, and I'm really proud to be part of it.
That will go back through the
Stakeholder groups?
That'll come back to the champions at the shared,
which I'm not one of,
working group.
so
No,
I
you're
would
not.
love to be included.
So you
in
can.
that.
So maybe everyone could be invited, Leanne, to those.
That's right.
To observe when we have those working group meetings. I'll talk to you about that.
It'll
afterwards.
just be an email though, won't it?
Yeah.
We can share
Yes,
it by
yeah,
email.
the report,
to
yeah.
all councillors. Absolutely.
And my last thing is I'm really interested around this table, particularly from our Māori councillors, what your thinking are, what your thoughts are on those specific focus groups to capture that, the Mātauranga Māori and the Māori voice. If you feel that is adequate to give robustness to the project, is it the right approach, or are you thinking a different way of doing this? So I really welcome your expertise. We don't have Thompson here, but maybe Michelle, you might like to have a go at that.
I don't know who you've got there, but you'd be hoping that there's some sort of cultural advisor who has expertise in advising around the awa and Mātauranga Māori, the whakapapa to the taio, etc. And mana whenua, ultimately they've got to come from there. But that's for our people. Usually you know who those people are in your hapori, among your hapori and whānau. So that's vital. Cultural advice. Just when I just consider, if I give an example, so when we were going through the stakeholder group for the flood protection back home, it was when the maps were put up and you could see where the floods had gone, and I knew the history of my area and the pars, etc., that were in that area, even when the tsunami had hit centuries ago. There were pars up on the hill, and I couldn't understand why they were so high, but then through research, and oratory, there's a lot of clues in kupu Māori. There's a lot of clues in our history, even in our waiata, everything, our motiatia. There's a lot of clues in there, and if people listen, then your Wadley will tell you a certain thing, but there's even kōrero back home about Waipuke, about that area is where the floods always went through for centuries, so there's a richness in our mātauranga, and just need to have the right people sitting there,
Thanks, Councillor McElroy. Do you want to make a comment, Te Wairama?
Yeah, hei tēnā koe, Councillor McElroy, and thank you for that. I think we're quite grateful to have the expertise of Ngai o Shade and representatives from Aroha Mai, Tamatea Pokai Whenua and Mana Ahuriri in the technical advisory group. However, this morning, in a discussion with the Māori Partnerships Rōpū, particularly Te Kahaha Waikirangi, who's leading our Mātauranga Māori integration piece for the project, we had a very direct and deliberate discussion around recognising those Mātauranga experts at place and ensuring that they are present in the focus groups, and we talked about layers at a hapu and a marae level, but we also talked about those who know the awa and the whenua in those areas that we're discussing as well. So definitely.
That's the other part, I agree with you, Te Wairama. The other part is understanding mahinga kai practitioners, like you might have someone who has that knowledge that I just spoke about, but there's also the mahinga kai practitioners because they understand the awa, they understand the flow, when you're fishing, you want to be getting, you want to be being able to feed your whānau. And so you've got to understand the why to produce that. So never underestimate the knowledge of our mahinga kai practitioners, our fishermen, our hunters, our gatherers.
Good, thank you. We have a recommendation to receive and note the report. Do we have a mover for that? Thank you. Councillor Kuklinski and a seconder. Councillor Waitoa, thank you. Would you like to make any further comments?
Just that there were lots of good discussions about the build-up of shingle aggregate from Crown Land. It would be remiss of me not to mention that.
It would be.
Right, in both groups.
In both groups. Thank you. Any further comments from you, Councillor Waitoa?
Just from me, opportunity. So we have TAG, we have focus group, reference group, steering group before we get to Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So when we talk about representation, is there opportunity from focus group to move up to reference group, steering group, if you have that mātauranga available to bring forward?
So I think in terms of the reference groups, yes, I think the idea is that we may have some overlap. If you don't need to be just on one, you could be in a reference group and a focus group, so there's space there for sure. The steering groups are formed by councillors and governors from PSGEs, so I think that's reasonably set at that layer. But certainly in the SRG focus group layer, there's flexibility to elevate. If we find some more people that are keen and available and interested, then welcome that, absolutely.
Any other comments? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Carried. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mike had his hand up. I saw it flash on the screen.
Sorry, Mr Parker. Would you like to make a comment?
Just more supporting the kōrero of Thingi Te Wairama.
You need to,
really
lean
important.
up to the microphone, Mike.
Sorry, once again. I think it's really important that, just want to really support the kōrero of Thingi Te Wairama. It's really important that we understand the various layers. I take the point that our PSGs are sitting there, but don't think that they have all the answers. That would be a fatal mistake to make. We do need to involve all of our hapu, our marae, especially those that have that connection, where we're looking to place that water storage. So I would work really, really closely with Te Wairama and her team to make sure we're actually covering everyone off. Well, otherwise, it will all fall apart further on down the road. And that's just from experience that we've all witnessed, unfortunately.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr Paku. We've already moved that recommendation, so we will stop for 10 minutes to grab a cup of tea, and we're just going to come back for our last paper afterwards, which is the land categorisation paper. So grab a cuppa and come back. Everyone. Last item for the day, item 7.3, land categorisation update and future direction. Thank you, Chief Executive. Do you want to open this for us?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. And just to introduce the team, you obviously know Chris Dolly as a GM Assets, Jessica Easton, who has been our counsel since the very early days of Cyclone and has guided a lot of our work in this area through the recovery process, and Mike Johansson, you know, as our Director. Look, I'll hand over to the team. My reflection on land categorisation, it's been an absolutely critical part of the recovery process for Hawke's Bay. Once government announced its land categorisation framework and handed the job to the regional council of doing what is essentially a hazard risk assessment in rapid time across large areas, across 3,000 properties, the council has responded and done that work. And it's been hugely complex. It's been incredibly emotional for the communities involved, and continues to be for some people. So acknowledge that it's never been an easy process. What this paper does is mark essentially the beginning of the process now to move on from the land categorisation that was done post-Cyclone Gabriel. So it's marking the beginning of starting to retire land categorisation. It was only ever a point in time, and it's increasingly getting to the point where it's served its purpose, and the team will take you through the retirement process. But yeah, just acknowledge the huge amount of effort, the scale of the work that's had to go on, but also how challenging it's been for all the people who've had to be involved in it, both staff and communities. With that, Chair, I might just hand over to Mr. Dolly and Ms. Easton to take you through.
Thanks, Nick. So I'll hand over to Jess in a minute just to go through the key points, but just to reiterate our Chief Executive there for our new councillors. So post-Gabriel, there was, significant damage and devastation through large tracts of land. And part of the government's response was to create the FOSL, or the Future of Severely Affected Land framework. That was initially led out by a task force headed up by Sir Brian Roche, and he came to Hawke's Bay to articulate the FOSL process and the fact that there was a land categorisation process to undertake. And we sat in the room with all the other councils, the Insurance Council, etc., and worked through how that might work and who should lead that work. So obviously with the skill sets that the Hawke's Bay Regional have in flood hazard calculation and identification, that was a job that was led by the Regional Council with input from a number of other parties. So at the time, it was really important that we could provide certainty to the community. So it was a focus that we could do a good job, but also do a quick job and not have people hanging around to try and understand what was happening. And there was really three categories that were determined, which was the category 1, which meant that your area might have been flooded, but there was no sort of risk to life from that. The category 2, which was there was interventions that may be possible to improve flood resilience so that it was a safer place to live, and category 3, which meant it wasn't a good place to live, and that initiated a voluntary buyout process. So that voluntary buyout process was headed by Hastings District Council and is now complete. Our category 2 work, which is our NIWI program, that $250 million infrastructure program, is well underway, with construction commenced in multiple locations, and category 1 in particular has no real benefit really going forward. So this paper really outlines how we intend to move forward and transition sort of back to a business as usual process. So I'll hand over to Jess to really take us through the key points, and we've also got Mike here to talk about our communications approach as well. So with that, over to you, Jess.
So just to reiterate the overarching test that was applied in terms of the risk assessment that this council was responsible for was to ask the question, is there an intolerable risk to life? If there is, can we mitigate that risk? So in a very simplistic term, that's what this whole program of work drilled down to. We've always intended for this process to eventually move into our BAU processes. It was part of the recovery response. As Nick said, it's a moment in time, really. And so we're now at the stage where we're able to start to progress back into what our council BAU processes, and those are both our processes and the processes for the TLAs. And noting the reason we have to do that and why we need to retire land categorisation is that it's not based in statute. It doesn't stem from any statutory powers or obligations. So it is policy based. So it is important that we get back to our statutory functions. So in terms of each of the categories, I'll just step through the plan. So category 3. That's the category where there was an intolerable risk to life and it could not be mitigated. That was the determination of technical experts, and we only had technical experts making those recommendations through to councils. So for the Hawke's Bay region, that was fluvial engineers with experience in flooding on fluvial plains. So category 3 then progressed through to buyouts, which were conducted by Hastings District Council, and I think there was a handful at Napier City Council as well, but Hastings District Council primarily led that process. There were 326 properties that were in category 3, and 167 of those were eligible for the buyout policy, which was the policy that sits with the TLAs. And subsequently 151 property owners completed settlements through that process. Now we're at a stage where we're able to, or we've had time to do updated flood hazard modelling. So the land category maps are essentially a flood hazard map. It identifies the area that flooded during Cyclone Gabrielle pretty closely, which represented also the future flood risk for those areas. What we've, or I should say Chris's team have done in the last couple of years is undertaken robust flood modelling of those areas. So we have a much more up-to-date, much more robust model that we're able to rely on into the future. So once those flood hazard models are finalised for each of the category 3 areas, we are essentially replacing those category 3 maps with the new updated flood hazard modelling. The plan is for those models to be uploaded into our hazard portal, and so that will be available for the whole community to access, for insurers to access, banks, TLAs, any stakeholders that use that information for their purposes. So we're doing this in a staged approach. It does take time to complete this modelling, and Chris can answer any questions around that if there are any. We're starting with ESC and Tangoyo, and is the peer review complete? We're in the peer review process at the moment, I believe.
It's very close to being finished. I've got a report on my desk to go through.
Yeah. So once that's finalised and we're able to update the flood hazard portal, we'll then be able to retire the category 3 maps for the ESC and Tongoyo. So we envisage we'll be able to do that early next year. And we'll just progress through each of the category 3 areas from there. Do you have anything else you wanted to?
Not on that one, no.
The next category I'll talk to is category 2C. So category 2C are areas where an intolerable risk to life was identified, but we were able to come up with a mitigation for those communities to reduce the risk to a tolerable level. So those are your Cat 2C flood mitigation projects. There are 5 of them across the region, and as you know, and I think there's probably been an update today, those are progressing across the region. Once those projects get to a stage where they meet, there's 3 criteria in the policy where they meet that criteria. So where we have a consenting pathway for the project, we've acquired all the necessary land to build the infrastructure, and we have the funding confirmed from the Crown to deliver those projects, we're then able to progress those communities through to Category 1. And then eventually they will move out of land categorisation when Category 1 is retired. So we've done 2 communities so far. I think the Havelock North and Waiheke have moved from Category 2C to Category 1 already. Oamahu is not far away, I understand, and it looks as though Pakawhai will be ready early next year as well. So those continue to progress. Category 1. So Category 1 is, as Chris mentioned, the category where we assessed risk and we said actually risk is at a tolerable level. There are some misconceptions about property in Category 1 having to have flooded or having to have had damage to arrive in that category. That's not correct. So it's areas that we looked at and we determined there's no intolerable risk. At this point in time, Category 1 it essentially doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. So we think we're at a stage now where we can retire that. The only purpose within the policy framework that it does serve is that the Category 2C areas are moving to Category 1, which they will still do, but then we will retire Category 1. So we're planning to do that in December this year. And so we will remove what is a flood hazard layer essentially, or not, it's a hazard layer, but Category 1 layer across all of Hawke's Bay. That will disappear this year. Did you want to add anything on that?
Not on Category 1, no.
So that's our stage process for each of the categories. We still have an open and available process for people to come to us to ask questions, make queries, object to things that are happening, and we're still engaging in those processes. So just to be aware, there's unlike some other regions where those doors have been closed, we've left that door open for people to come to us, and we continue to talk to a handful of people who are trying to understand the implications for them and where we're headed with land categorisation. So it's helpful now that we're at this stage that we can give people more certainty about these categories retiring. I think that's probably all I need to update on, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Through the Chair, Jess, I might just ask you to comment on, as well as the hazard portal, that we're working with Hastings around their district plan.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I won't be able to talk to it in too much detail, but essentially once we put information into the hazard portal, the territorial authorities rely on that information to inform their district planning processes. They'll use that information when considering applications for building consents. So there are functions that the TLAs have, or statutory obligations that they have, and they rely on hazard information from the regional council to determine what their response will be to their statutory obligations essentially. And so we'll keep working with Hastings District Council, who are looking to amend their district plan in light of our updated hazard modelling, and that will be something that they will be able to provide updates to the community on as they progress through that process.
Yes, and I've been speaking with Mayor Wendy, so she's aware of what's going on, how that's interfacing, and we'll keep in communication with them as we move through it. Question? Are you ready for questions? Yes?
I think so. Look, I think really the headline is by sort of Q3 of next year, we're planning to have fully retired the Category 3 process. So very much forward-looking. In 9 months, hopefully, we'll be back to those statutory hazard layers.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh, question?
Yes, reference paragraph 14 on 46, which was the one you were reading from before about the number of properties that had been assessed and where we ended up. So 3,000 assessed, 167 eligible for the Cat 3 buyout, and 151 settlements reached. So the 16 properties that where settlement hasn't been reached. So they're still engaged in one of those things that are that you mentioned at the end that are still available to them to have a reassessment of their situation. Is that right?
So not all of those property owners have come forward, and so the TLAs have conducted that process, so we're not necessarily privy to who those property owners are. We are engaging with a handful of people who are or property owners who are in Category 3, but certainly not 19. There'll be a variety of reasons why people haven't chosen to participate in the voluntary buyout processes, whether it be they were unable to reach agreement on a valuation, or they may not have elected to participate in the process at all. I can't be sure why, but we are working with some Category 3 property owners who are looking to have their categorisation removed, yes. And that process continues, yes.
Questions, Councillor Roadley?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm interested in the piece for what will go into the hazard portal that will be then extracted for those various uses as you've described. The properties that will go in who were Category 3 will now be Category 1 because of the infrastructure the Regional Council has provided. What's the language that will be used in there to describe that process for those? Well, they're not Category 1, they're because that won't exist. So what's the language that will describe that they've been through this process and have now been assessed to be not...
So the plan is in terms of retiring land categorisation that we won't refer to those categories anymore.
I understand that.
Yep, so we won't...
What's the language that will just sit with that property? Anything?
Well, in terms of the Category 2C, so Category 3...
What do you mean the hazard portal?
Sorry, I'm thinking the Category 2C, my mistake.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's confusing.
Okay.
Category 2C, which we've put the protection in place, now they've been moved off. What will stay on the limbs? What will the language be that reflects they've been involved in that process? Sorry, my mistake.
I understand, yeah. So in terms of, the Category 2C, so they will move through to Category 1, but in turn we're retiring Category 1, so the categorisation will fall away at HBRC. In terms of what will sit on limbs for those properties, that is a decision that the TLAs will have to make, and I assume, I know they're taking advice on that. It's possible they might take different positions on what remains on a limb, but I'm working with them currently and with their legal counsel to work that through. My view is that once we have the updated flood hazard model, that's the most up-to-date information, that's what's relevant for the limb, and the categorisations or the categories have been retired, so I would like to see those come off the limbs, but it is a matter for the TLAs.
Okay, so I understand that piece that the TLAs will be utilising that information, how they choose and reflects what they want to do. But for our piece that we're putting into the hazard portal, when general public are looking at the map for whatever reason it might be, what are they likely to see for those properties that are no longer not Category 1 because that doesn't exist? So how will they know that they've been through this process and are still subject to risk because none of our protections are 100% fail-safe proof forever and a day? So how will we language?
So those locations will look the same as any other location in which the flood hazard will be identified and it will be articulated on the map. There'll then be a reference in the map to the report or the date of the report that generated that flood hazard map, but we're not planning on any additional information that connects them to a previous land categorisation process in the flood hazard.
So if I'm a new person to Hawke's Bay and I'm looking to purchase a piece of land or a home, and how will I know that that has been previously flooded or impacted by a breach in a stop bank or a whatever it might have been? How will I know that that has occurred, particularly 20 years, 30 years from now?
Yep.
How will I know that that has been subject to that?
So I think there is a public layer, which is the Gabriel flooding layer. So that's available on the hazard portal.
So we have the land categorisation maps. Will always exist while we're retiring them. They're obviously information that is out. It's in the public domain. There's a website which contains that information. That information obviously doesn't disappear. So, I mean, if people inquire with HBRC and ask those questions, that is information we would be obligated to share with them.
However, sorry, I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
Chair,
okay.
am I allowed to dig into this?
Yes, but I want to make the point, Councillor Roadley, that the newest flood information that has just been released is what will be on the hazard portal. So anyone looking on there can see the flood risks within the district. Areas that were previously flooded and categorised to 3, category 3, will in the district plan of the TAs be non-residential land. So effectively, if you're coming to look at land in the district and you pull up any map, there is residential land that is considered safe for building, and that will be tied to levels of protection like every house in Hastings is. There's been houses in Hastings that have been flooded before. So I do see where you're going, but you need to be clear about its relevance to our part in that.
Hazard portal is what I'm...
The hazard portal will show the up-to-date flood mapping.
So for a...
Which supersedes the Gabriel event, which can still be seen, but supersedes that.
So to simplify it, if we had an area that was category 3, when we have completed the new flood hazard modelling, it will look very similar. So what you'll see in say you take Esk as an example, the category 3 will be retired, but the new hazard layer will be implemented, and they look very similar. And so now there will be a statutory position as to why that flood hazard layer exists, and it's the most recent information we have.
And the TAs, at their own choice, layer those hazards onto the limbs as they see appropriate or into their district plan changes. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Question?
Again, point 14, there were almost 3,000 properties assessed per council. There were 326 properties categorised, either all or partly within category 3. Then there were only 167 that were eligible. What was the criteria why the 326, only 167 were eligible?
The category 3 voluntary buyout policy is not a HBRC policy, so those policies sit with the TLAs, and they stipulate various criteria for eligibility. Don't quote me on this because it's not. I've not worked with the policy here, but I envisage it'll be things like whether there were consented. You know, it had to be a consented dwelling. So if properties didn't have consent, they might not have gone through. Although they would have been eligible. So.
Yes, I just
There'd
think...
be properties without dwellings as well. That'll be the main one.
Properties without dwellings.
Probably properties without dwellings will be the main reason. Yeah.
But also, if you didn't work with that policy and it was an HDC policy, I think we should be careful about speaking to that.
Assumptions.
But we can certainly ask for that for our information back to this council if we're interested. Yeah. Any more questions? The recommendation is to receive and note the land categorisation updates and future direction. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor McIntosh? Councillor Roadley, thank you. Would you like to speak to that? Just comments now. We won't put any more questions to staff.
Oh, no, just noting the whole thing was a really, really big project, and the council can be proud for the part that it played in it.
Thank you. Councillor Roadley?
Yes, reiterating that, and also to thank this team for approaching this with the appropriate sensitivities around people's whenua, people's homes, and that interface with the Crown requirements and natural hazards. So we thank you for your empathy for those people who were deeply affected.
Thank you for your comments. Other comments?
Yep.
Councillor Van Beek?
Yeah, so totally the category 3, and it was great for HDC and Crown to come to the rescue of those who lived in areas where there was no mitigation possible and where there was a risk of life in any future events of a same or even lesser event. And that was really great, and really appreciate the work that we were able to add to that mahi, which has been really good. However, as those returning councillors know, I've worked with a lot of landowners that actually were caught up in a mixed category, so to speak, mixed properties, and it has been really tough for them. So we should not forget them either. They actually have been going through a tough time. It'll be really interesting to see when we actually retire the Category 3 system, how they will actually then fare after that, and hopefully we'll have a beer or a wine and celebrate a good outcome for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's really important to acknowledge them. We know some people are still in that situation. Councillor Ormsby, thank you.
Chair. Just to acknowledge the team for your hard work, swift work to bring certainty to a lot of these communities. If we reflect on how Auckland's managed their land categorisation and buyout process, it's been very hard for those communities. I have a cousin involved and they're still going through a negotiation for Category 3, which meant their lives have been on hold for a very long time. So thank you for that hard work. Thank you for providing certainty for those communities, but also working with those communities to provide a solution that we could for 2C and eventually to go back to 1. So we are coming to the end of this process almost. And I think it's been incredible the way that we've been able to work as a region. So thank you for that work. Thank you for the collaboration and bringing certainty to our communities.
No further comments. Thank you for all your comments. We have a mover and a seconder. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Yes, mover and seconder. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Carried. Thank you. And echoing all those comments, really appreciate your work. Thank you also to our Chief Executive who played a pivotal role in this as he stepped into the position right in the middle of it. Thank you, Nick. We have come to the end of the meeting. Councillor Waitoa has offered to close us as well. Thank you.
O tēnā koutou mō tēnei hui mō o kōrero pono, o kōrero kaha o kore aroha kia mātou, ana reira kei te mihi. E tangi ana tēnākau mō te honga kua whihi atu i a tātou. Haere atu rā koutou ki te kāinga wairua o koutou mātua tipuna, moi mai e rangimari e. So thank you for our meeting today, for the pono, for the words that are put through, the caring for our community and our region. We also, that our hearts grieve for those who have gone before us, who have gone to that spiritual homeland of their ancestors, and that they rest in peace. He karakia whakamotuna kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tō tātou ariki a hihu karaite, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinatahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, 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 ake. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thanks.